Buying a car may possibly be one of the worst financial decisions that you can possibly make. It is often said that a normal new car on average loses 5% of its value the minute that you drive it off the lot. And even more so if it's from a luxury manufacturer like Mercedes-Benz or BMW. And even if you're somebody who deems themselves to be financially savvy, so you make the decision to buy a used car that has already taken the bulk of its depreciation hit, the majority of people are not expecting that car to go up in value over time. Yet, there is a select group of cars that over time have appreciated wildly, outpacing a lot of different mainstream asset classes while still being something that you can actually use and enjoy. Like the air-cooled Porsche phase that we saw maybe 5 to 8 years ago, where a turbo model went from being a $50,000 car to regularly transacting for over $150,000 basically overnight. Or stick-shift Lamborghini Murcielagos that not that long ago were selling for around $150,000, but nowadays are regularly selling for between $300,000 and $500,000. Or a car like the E30 BMW M3. Not that long ago, people were picking those up for like $15,000 and turning them into track cars, but nowadays a pristine example could fetch as much as $100,000. So what is it about these cars that makes them reverse the normal depreciation trend? Well, I believe that these cars have a common set of characteristics that we can use to predict what cars may be the most likely to go up in price in the future. So as we get into it, I just kind of want to level set. The vast majority of cars, maybe like 99.9%, are depreciating assets. And that is for two primary reasons. As a car ages, it becomes outdated and it also accumulates wear and tear. And inversely to that, when somebody makes the decision to buy a new car, it's usually to avoid those two things. People often want the latest and greatest features in terms of tech, and at the same time, they don't want something that's been used before. So they perceive it as being more reliable and having lower maintenance costs. And the two primary ways that we determine this are through the car's model year, just saying how old it is, and the mileage. And when you start to look at car depreciation curves, you can kind of see the interaction between these two different variables. An older model year car with fewer miles may be selling around the same price as a newer model, but with more miles. But this depreciation curve, or the rate at which a car is going to lose value, is not the same across all segments. For cars that depreciate slower or tend to hold their value, you could look at a brand like Toyota. Toyota does two things that are unique that help their cars hold on to their value. For one, they have a reputation for making ultra reliable cars that last a long time, which kind of counteracts the wear and tear factor. And in addition to this, Toyota will let each generation of one of their models stay on the market for a lot longer, and broadly, they're pretty slow to adopt new technology. And to see this in practice, you can look at a vehicle like the Toyota 4Runner. The fifth generation of this car came out in 2010 and ran through 2024. And you can see that a 2010 4Runner holds its value very well because it's basically the same exact car they were selling up until this year. And more broadly, I would say that Toyota's buyers just aren't as focused on having the latest and greatest features. Now, on the flip side of this, many luxury automakers are notorious for having their cars depreciate extremely fast. And this is for the same reasons that Toyotas follow the opposite trends. While Toyotas have a reputation for being reliable and cheap to maintain and repair, luxury brands are the opposite. They have a reputation for being unreliable and extremely expensive to maintain and repair. Where Toyota buyers don't really feel the need to have the latest and greatest technology, that is exactly what luxury buyers are looking for. They want their car to have the latest features. And because of that, luxury brands will turn over their models a lot faster, which means that their cars become outdated quickly. But outside of just the brand, there are particular segments within the car market that depreciate at different rates. A pickup truck is not going to depreciate at the same rate as an EV, which isn't going to depreciate at the same rate as a crossover. I just want to be clear that there is a lot of nuance going on here. The rate of depreciation also tends to slow down over time. A car is going to lose most of its value as a proportion of its original MSRP probably over its first 5 years or first 100,000 miles. And in most cases, there is a price floor that most cars will reach, provided that they are still in good running order. Now, to zoom out, that is the case for most cars. They depreciate quickly at first, and then they reach a point where they might not lose any additional value, but they are surely not going to go up in price. But the cars that we're talking about today don't do that. They basically defy the laws of automotive pricing physics and actually go up in price over time. And really, at the end of the day, what is driving that is supply and demand. There is something about these cars that increases demand or limits supply and results in a rising price. And before we get into that, it's also important to point out that the purpose of these cars is different than 99% of cars on the market. A normal car is bought by normal people to get from point A to point B. And things like practicality and reliability take precedent over how the car looks or sounds. But for the types of cars that are most likely to go up in value, things like practicality and usability are pushed aside, and things like emotion and engagement take precedent. And the type of people that buy these cars aren't normies that are looking for transportation. It is often car enthusiasts who are trying to scratch a particular automotive itch. So now let's expand on that and talk about the types of attributes that tend to lend themselves to appreciation. I would say the first category that you could identify are cars that have had a significant impact on automotive history. Now, I think this is pretty low-hanging fruit. With any type of collectible item, a particular model that had a really big impact on the industry is going to be something that is sought after. But regardless of that, let's take, for example, the Lamborghini Miura that came out in 1966. It is widely considered to be the first true supercar because of its mid-mounted V12 engine and manual transmission. When this car was new, it had an inflation-adjusted MSRP of between $80,000 and $200,000, depending on how you do your math. But nowadays, one of these cars is not transacting for less than $1.5 million, and for more special models, they can reach up to $3 million. But there is something else going on here because there are a lot of other cars that have had a big impact on the automotive industry. The second generation Ford Explorer was huge for popularizing the crossover SUV in the United States. And you could argue that from a business perspective, it made an even greater impact. But there are two things that prevent the second generation Explorer from seeing the type of price appreciation we've seen with the Miura. For one, the Explorer is just not an enthusiast car. It isn't meant to appeal to any particular buyer or any particular niche. It was a car that was intended to have mass appeal, and that's just not a good recipe to generate a passionate following. And the other factor is just that Ford built a lot of them. Scarcity is one of the things that really can make a car sought after. And that is really just basic supply and demand. With stable demand, a decrease in supply will result in a rising price. But in the car world, I think there can even be a rise in demand that results from the fact that there is just limited supply. Because people want to have cars that are unique, that are special, that other people don't have access to. To put things into perspective from our example earlier, Ford built hundreds of thousands of second-gen Explorers, while Lamborghini built about 700 Miuras, which is why one of those cars sells for $20,000 to $30,000 for a nice example, while the other car costs $3 million for a nice example. So I think those two factors are pretty intuitive. Cars that are important to automotive history and rare are likely to go up in value. Now, let's dive a little bit deeper and talk about some of the specific attributes of the driving experience itself that lend themselves to a car going up in price. And we'll actually hit on two of those here. Cars that look good and sound good. Take, for example, the Ferrari F355, a car that is notorious for being unreliable as well as being incredibly expensive to maintain. But damn it, if that isn't one of the best looking and sounding cars of all time. And the car market has come to recognize that over the past few years, with the ceiling for what a good example can sell for just absolutely exploding. But building on that, with the Ferrari F355, for example, or a lot of other supercars from the 90s or 2000s, there's something that they have that is not available in new supercars today. Naturally aspirated engines and manual transmissions. And what this boils down to is that cars that were the last of something, or cars that offer an experience that you're not able to get in a new car today, are good candidates for vehicles that are going to be sought after. So the last generation of a supercar that had a manual transmission, a naturally aspirated engine, or in the future, I think versions that featured ICE engines only and weren't hybrid or electric. Now, for one of the last points, we can actually kind of predict when a car is most likely to start appreciating. Generally, we will see the value of a car bottom out around the 10 to 15 year mark, really when it has become old and outdated. But then around the 15 to 20-year-old mark is when we start to see prices ticking back up. And really what drives this is that the generation of car enthusiasts that were kids when these cars were coming out, they grow up and they get money and they want to buy their childhood dream car. And at that point, they don't care that it's old and outdated. They want it because it's the car they dreamed about when they were young. Now, with all of that laid out, let's talk about some cars that fit these characteristics that I think are most likely to start appreciating. We're gonna kick things off with a 2-for-1 and talk about the E46 and E90 generations of the BMW M3. Both of these cars check a lot of boxes on our list. Compared to the normal 3 Series, they are very rare. The E46 in particular was the last BMW to feature a naturally aspirated inline-6 engine, and these cars have already started to go up in price. While the E90 was the only mass production M3 to feature a V8 engine, and I think right now is at the bottom of its depreciation curve and is primed to start going back up. And in terms of styling, both of these cars feature far more conservative designs compared to the BMW M3 of today, and I think are widely held in pretty high regard by enthusiasts. Another car I want to shout out is the 5th generation Camaro Z28. This car is exceptionally rare and features a unique engine compared to any other Camaros, and is only available with a manual transmission. Not to mention that the Z28 was basically like a street legal race car. You could option this thing without air conditioning to save weight, which is absolutely insane. Now, one thing that is unique about this car is it has basically stopped depreciating altogether, as in real time enthusiasts have recognized how special it is. But I think that in the future, it's only going to go back up. And this car's main competitor at the time, a vehicle that I am a very big fan of, the Ford Mustang GT350. And again here, this is a car that had a unique engine only available in this one model, and you could only get this car with a manual transmission. Now, the production run for the GT350 was a lot longer than the one for the Z28. So it may continue to depreciate, but I do think in the long term, this car is almost guaranteed to be a winner. And lastly, I'm gonna make this one a little bit broader. Japanese cars that were widely embraced by tuners, models from the 1990s and 2000s, but are in stock form. I'm talking about cars like the Subaru WRX STI, the Mitsubishi Evo, the Nissan 240SX, or even the Mazda RX-8. These cars have a few different things going for them. For one, they are very analog compared to modern cars, and they have become exceptionally rare because a lot of these cars got really cheap. People bought them, people modified them, turned them into drift cars, into track cars, finding a clean, unmodified example is going to be very difficult. And these cars are incredibly important and iconic for younger millennials or older Gen Z that grew up in the mid 2000s. These were the cars that they were lusting after. And we've already started to see some price appreciation in this segment. The Mark IV Toyota Supra is trading for crazy amounts of money, but even vehicles like the first generation Honda Civic Si has started to tick up. I truly believe that the floodgates here are about to open, and if you have a clean, unmodified version of one of these cars, it's going to be worth a lot of money. So there you have it, the entire car depreciation cycle, as well as some factors that can actually lend themselves to price appreciation. Again, this is not something that is totally able to be predicted or explained, and the vast majority of cars are going to continue to lose value as they age and accumulate wear and tear. But for those cars that are rare enough, special enough, look good, sound good, or offer something that you're not able to get in a new car today, if you buy one of these and take good care of it, it might just go up in value.